Okay. Oh no.
Whatever, I'm here. So however you want to do it, sister, I'm down. You say go, I'm going. Facilitation just requires sometimes reading tricky names, but that's not, you know what I mean? I apologize if I do.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Oh, it's okay. Yeah, I can just, it's good to email us. Yeah.
Fight dog.
Yeah. That's fine. Yeah, that's better actually. You know? Yeah. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
I want to get your perspective, but you're not allowed to do that. Yes. Oh yeah, no, it's inevitable. Well, I try to wear like high and then put the or
If we could find our seats and focus our energy and attention, I would appreciate it greatly. We're moments from beginning. All right, in the interest of time, welcome everyone to the NYC Racial Justice Commission Public Input Sessions. Thank you first to the Hamilton-Madison House for supporting the many arrangements that were made to bring us here today, and the many staff that so warmly welcomed all of us here, fellow commissioners, to this space here in the Lower East Side. My name is Bain. I'm the Executive Director of Community Capacity Development. I have also been appointed to serve on the Racial Justice Commission as a commissioner and stand before you here today in that capacity. My pronouns are he and him. I have also been appointed here to serve on the Racial Justice Commission as a commissioner and stand before you. I would like my co-commissioners, if you wouldn't mind, starting and introduce yourself, please, and state your pronouns.
Good evening. My name is Fred Davey. In my day job, I am Senior Strategic Advisor to the President, Union Theological Seminary at Columbia University. So glad to be here tonight. My pronouns are he, him.
Good evening. My name is Ana Bermudez. My day job is Commissioner of the Department of Probation here in New York City, although I'm not here in that capacity. My pronouns are she, ella.
Good afternoon. I'm Jennifer Jones Austin, and I serve during the day and on the weekends at the Federation of Protestant Welfare Agencies. My pronouns are she, her.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joanne Yu. I'm the Executive Director of the Asian American Federation. That's my day job. And my pronouns are she, her. And I want to give a special shout out to my friend Isabel, who is the Executive Director of Hamilton Madison. I'm I'm just really grateful for her for opening up her space for us.
Yeah, that's he and him. I'm Ty.
Thank you. And so before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the history of the land in which we convene on tonight, the land of Native people indigenous to this country and to the traditional home of the Munsee, Lenape, and Wappinger peoples. I also want to acknowledge the space that we are in today and thank the Hamilton-Madison House for hosting this session. The Madison House was founded in 1898 to fight some of the serious problems of the day. Hamilton House was established in 1902 to help the new Italian immigrants who were suffering from tuberculosis. Over the 20th century, this community continued to evolve from a population that was Jewish and Italian to Irish, Dominican, African-American, and finally, Chinese. Both Hamilton House and Madison House continue to change to meet the needs of their individual communities, and in 1954, joined forces to become Hamilton-Madison House that we know today. Thank you for your commitment to serving this community. And thank you all for attending today's session to tell us what you believe are the most critical issues we, the commission, should address through the changes in the New York City Charter that would have the greatest impact on the lives of New Yorkers impacted by racism across NYC. Before we begin, if anyone needs interpretation, please see the sign-in table. Where are interpreters located? In the front. Okay. Thank you.
So in terms of the commission, the Racial Justice Commission is tasked with proposing changes to the city's charter that will uproot structural racism. We will lay the groundwork for a racially equitable city where race is not a determinant of economic, political, social, and psychological outcomes. New York City voters will be able to vote on the commission's proposals as ballot measures in the November 2022 election. The commission is composed of 11 members, and we are intentionally bringing together smaller groups of commissioners to host each public input session. And in terms of the charter, The charter is the constitution essentially of New York City, the foundation of our government. The charter determines the roles and responsibilities of city agencies, the mayor, and other local elected officials. So this commission is empowered to propose changes in to the city charter, which then must be approved by New York City voters. Through charter revision, the commission can propose direct changes that will affect you, your families, neighborhoods, and communities, such as how city government spends money and makes decisions. It can change government in all aspects of life, including health, education, housing, economic opportunities, and policing. It can create or change agencies or the powers of officials.
The commission values your expertise and engaged residents of New York City. Every voice matters. You have firsthand experience on the way in which the city government impacts housing security and affordability, zoning, parks, small businesses, public safety, and so much more. Today, we're here to listen to you, to hear what critical issues most impact your ability to gain access to resources and have the opportunity to live a thriving, healthy, and safe life in your respective communities. We need your help in identifying the barriers to achieving racial justice. We need you to bring to the commission's attention ways the government acts unfairly that we may not know about. Your collective input will help us identify patterns that point to larger structural issues within the city. Your input helps us to know what issues are most important and most pressing to everyday New Yorkers. Every testimony will be kept in city record, and the highlighted issues will shape what the commission creates as ballot measures. Your input will quite literally shape recommendations for ballot measures in the November 2022 election.
We're hosting these meetings differently than most public meetings are held and conducted. What we'd like to do is to restore balance of power to the community. So what we've done is we've incorporated restorative justice techniques into this session. You know, if you look around the room, what you'll appreciate is that instead of us sitting at a podium, we're, to the best extent possible, in a semicircle with you. We're trying to be eye to eye with you. Many of you in this room have been fighting for racial justice while enduring the very inequities that you're fighting against. We're going to start this session with an acknowledgement of the harm racism has caused Black, Indigenous, and other persons of color. We're then going to review some group agreements to set the foundation for this session tonight. And then we will start community testimony. If you haven't already registered to testify, you are still welcome to do so. Sign up at the table. When you came in, you saw a sign, and if you haven't already, then do so. Each and every person will have 3 minutes to testify, and that's what we've been doing across the city, and so we're going to honor that again tonight. Just 3 minutes. There'll be a stop clock. Stop clock is right here to help guide you and to keep you on time. Commissioners may ask follow-up questions of those testifying. And so to that end, we ask you to keep your testimony as brief as possible to allow for that follow-up. And also, once you've testified, to not leave the room because you may be asked follow-up questions immediately following the group of people that come up to testify. And I'll say a little bit about that. What we do is we call a few people, 4 people. We call their names all at once to testify. And what we ask is that those people stand in a line behind the microphone. And where is the microphone? It's right here. Okay. We're going to put it in the middle of the room or? Okay. All right. May need to move that chair. Just saying. We ask everybody to stand, socially distanced behind the microphone, one from another. If you're unable to stand, just let our staff know. And if staff would raise their hand so people know who the staff in the room are. Okay, just let them know and then we'll find a seat for you. after all persons who've been called up at once to testify have testified, again, we may have some questions, so we want you to stay near the microphone. And after the Q&A for each set of people to testify, we'll then move on to the next 4 people. May take a little while to just kind of get this right, but the staff are here to guide us all through the process. So please be patient with us.
We're also here tonight to acknowledge what many of us already know, that racial inequities are baked into the very foundations of this city. Deep-seated structural inequities continue to be reflected in almost every aspect of life, including health, education, public safety, and how our communities are resourced. Many of you in this room have known the brunt of this reality for far too long. Through the Racial Justice Commission, we have an opportunity to start to address and rectify the harms of the past through structural changes to the city government and how it functions to adequately and equitably serve all New Yorkers, no matter their race or zip code.
Since there are too many of us here to do this collectively, it's always important in these gatherings to have a set of group expectations and agreements. And they are posted over there for tonight. These agreements are then that we will show respect for ourselves for showing up and participating and doing the work of seeking racial justice, respect for the space that we occupy, respect for the health and safety of ourselves and the community. And by doing so, we agree to wear masks and socially distance ourselves. Respect for each other's right to speak. We're going to use one mic. We will turn off our cell phone volume. We will not cheer, boo, or speak while someone is testifying. We'll show respect for each other's time. We will respect the 3-minute time limit. And last but not least at all, actually, maybe the most important is that we espouse love, honesty, and transparency. Is there anything that has not been mentioned in terms of agreements? I'm sorry, is there something that we have mentioned today that you cannot agree to first? And then is anything missing for anyone? Anyone?
I'm sorry, can you speak?
She said the fact that persons may be on YouTube, is that correct? She's referring to the permission for people I assume to not want to be filmed or to be on YouTube.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, that people should know that. Yes, this is being broadcast over YouTube in our channel, the Racial Justice Commission channel.
If we can just comment on that for a second, I just want to make sure what you're saying is that if somebody wants to testify but does not want to be on YouTube. Is that what you're saying? So I just want to say to that point that we understand that and we respect that. This is a public meeting. And so what we would then ask of you is that if you do not want to testify, because this is to be public, we can't turn the cameras off or anything of that nature. But if there is someone who doesn't want to be publicly filmed or have their voice broadcasted, then just talk with a staff person and we'll make sure that we get your testimony, your comments offline. Thank you.
You. So we are going to call up first 3. So as our chair mentioned, we're going to start at the microphone. The number 2 and 3 and 4 will sit here, and we will slide down, and we will please observe the 3-minute rule. We hate to cut you off because I know we know that you have important things to say, but we want to be mindful of time. So as a reminder, this is being live streamed to the public. If you prefer to submit written testimony, please see one of the staff commissioners and we can help to facilitate that. So with that, I get to have the privilege of calling up our first speaker, our city's public advocate, Shawana Williams.
All right. Excuse me, commissioners, is it true that elected officials get half the time or they get the whole? Just want to be clear on the rules.
I should say, Public Advocate Williams, we're very glad that you're here and that you're joining us. We have tried our best to maintain a policy that everybody, regardless of title or position in the city, has 3 minutes because we're trying to balance power.
I will try my best to abide. If I can get a little bit of grace, I'll appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to speak. And obviously, it's amazing panel, commission, sorry, like Fred and Chris, but I have a special connection as well with Joanne Yu, who's done amazing work with my office, and this loudmouth brother over here, my brother from another, Bain, who was my legislative director and has done a lot of work around gun violence with me. So I just want to say thank you so much, and I really appreciate his support. And I guess, I started already. I was just saying what's up, but all right. As was mentioned, it's cool. My name is Shawana Williams. I'm a public advocate of the city of New York. Thank you for leading this public input session and granting me an opportunity to speak. I'd like to thank the mayor as well for putting together the Racial Justice Commission. Over the past year and a half, the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed and exacerbated the racial inequities that have long plagued New York City. While all New Yorkers have been impacted, the data shows that those coming from communities of more color have been hit the hardest, both medically and economically. Simultaneously, continued police violence and worsening hate crimes have further reinforced how racism remains ever present in our city. It is clear that we do not have a broken system that is in need of piecemeal reforms that tinker around the edges. The system is functioning the way the system was designed and intended to. Marginalized people on the basis of race across so many areas of our lives have been suffering. It's been ingrained in the DNA of our country. And what we need to do is figure out ways to replace the systems and structures that are there and put another one down. I hope that this commission can be a vehicle for transformational policy change that match the severity and the scope of the problems facing Black, Latino, Asian, and Indigenous communities. In this aim, I'd like to raise the following items for consideration to include this Charter Commission revision. Converting and legalizing basement apartments due to the impacts of climate change, flash flooding events are happening with more regularity. We have seen tragically Hurricane Ida. This puts hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers' lives in substandard basement apartments at serious risk. The basement apartment conversion pilot program in Brooklyn's Community District 5 successfully launched, but has since closed and not done too much. I think 9 out of 8,000 applications. Establishing a right to permanent housing. Currently, the New York City has a right to shelter mandate that requires the city to provide temporary emergency shelter to those experiencing homelessness on a given night. While well-intentioned, this framework has resulted in the overdependence of the shelter system, which provides insufficient living conditions and fails to address the root causes of homelessness. The forced relocation of people experiencing homelessness from this designated hotels to the shelter system is a prime example of this harmful pandemic. 3, ensuring marijuana legalization economically benefits communities of more color. Now that New York State has legalized marijuana, the city should take bold steps to create space in the new industry for entrepreneurs that come from the communities most harmed by the war on drugs. In order to do so, it should create an initial period upon legalization during which vending licenses are exclusively granted to applicants who meet certain criteria. Number 4, I'm actually cutting it short, so we're going to give you a written one so you can see the full proposals. Establishing a baby bonds program. Nationally, the white to Black disparity in median net worth is 19-1. A baby bonds program would help close the racial wealth gap in New York City and provide New Yorkers with much needed seed money for asset building expenses. 5, and there's 10, I'll run through them quickly. Establishing lifelong learning accounts. As the City Center for an Urban Future has found, over 456,000 New York City jobs are vulnerable to being eliminated in the coming years due to developments in automation. These jobs are disproportionately held by Black and Latinx workers. In order to ensure that New Yorkers can attain skills needed to thrive in a rapidly changing economy, support for education and job training by establishing a lifelong learning accounts program. 6, making transportation free for the lowest income New Yorkers. Transportation is a basic necessity that should not be denied to New Yorkers due to the inability to pay. 7, create a New York City Department of Public Safety. For too long, our city has equated public safety with policing. While the NYPD has a critical role to play, By providing acute law enforcement solutions to criminal situations, policing by itself cannot address all of the components. The Department of Public Safety, which the NYPD, FDNY, MOCJ, others can put it all under one roof and can really do the jump leap forward so that we can reimagine what public safety looks like altogether, including a 988 hotline accessible to the public so they can access mental health services differently. 8, increasing city council oversight over the NYPD and the Department of Education, including advice and consent in both the chancellor and the commissioner. Number 2, reforming the city budget process. And 10, developing the Office of the Public Advocates with essential tools to be able to provide more oversight, including subpoena power and appointment of independent counsel and independence from the Corporation Council. Of course, that last one has some benefit for the current occupant, but we do think it is beneficial for all of the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Public Advocate. Next to testify.
If I may,
Madam Chair.
Public Advocate, are you leaving? Are you leaving?
Yeah.
Okay, okay, good.
Right. The next person to testify is Lorette Humphrey.
While she's coming up, I just want to acknowledge leadership from Henry Street Settlement, Matthew Pfeiffer, comrade and colleague. I hope to hear you testify this evening, brother. All right.
Good evening to the panel, to Jamani Williams, to Mr. Miller. Thank you for inviting me. My name is Loretta Humphrey. You can't hear me? Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Loretta Humphrey. While most people came here through other venues, I am a descendant of an African-American slave. And I also know the challenges of people of color in America. I was born in it. Now, while I have faith in God, and I believe that policies, legislations, and laws, while being are good for change, but I know that we cannot change the hearts of man. If I could just address that, in order to change the law, you got to let the people know what the law is. And that is a failure there because most people don't know the law. They don't know the Jim Crow laws. They don't know the way that the laws were written to block and stop people from having advantages that the privileged have. Blacks have suffered over years at the hands of racist laws perpetrated by police officers. That's one of my main peeves is police officers getting away with murder. I think there should be not necessarily, I guess penalties would not be the word, but it should be some accountability, not only to the police officer, but also to the heads of that department. Housing, health, mental health, homelessness. We need to see how all those laws play into our system and how we can work through those laws to change those laws. By adding new laws and new changes, you know, you got to dismantle what you have already and try to do something new, something different. If we keep doing the same thing, we're going to keep getting the same results. My policy and my slogan is Jim Crow has got to go because they're all Jim Crow laws.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Humphrey. Next person to testify, if I mispronounce your name, I apologize. Haria Tarakin, did I get that right? Okay.
Thank you. My name is Haria Tarakin. I am the Senior Counsel to the Executive Director at the Civilian Complaint Review Board, and my pronouns are she and hers. I'm here to testify on behalf of the CCRB, the independent agency that provides civilian oversight over the NYPD. As an agency dedicated to holding police officers accountable for misconduct and providing recommendations to the NYPD on ways to improve policing and reduce negative interactions between the police and the public, I am here to present policy reforms related to police accountability that will advance racial justice and equity. With the stated goal of the commission being one of dismantling structural racism for all New Yorkers, it is imperative that we make changes in the way police officers who commit misconduct are held accountable. In 2020, over 80% of the individuals who alleged to have experienced police misconduct to the CCRB identified as people of color. Individuals who self-identified as Black made up 49% of our alleged victims, when they only make up about 24% of the city's population. To that end, the CCRB believes that changes need to happen, and these are the 4 concrete changes within the power of this commission that can have a real effect on improving public safety and the criminal justice system for all New Yorkers. First, the commission can change the charter to allow the CCRB to self-initiate complaints. With this power, the CCRB could proactively open investigations without placing the burden on those most vulnerable to file a complaint themselves. Second, the commission can exempt the CCRB from sealing statutes. Currently, statutes which were created to seal arrest records that are often sealed due to police misconduct are used to prevent the CCRB from investigating that same underlying misconduct that caused the arrest to be sealed. These documents will be particularly important as the agency embarks on investigating allegations of racial profiling and bias-based policing. Third, the commission can ratify the Dinkins Plan by updating the charter to empower the CCRB to conduct systemic reviews of NYPD's policy and practices, including racially bias-based policing, and make recommendations for reform. Finally, the commission can update the charter to give the CCRB final authority over discipline in CCRB cases, a concrete step increasing accountability and public trust in the city's commitment to hold officers accountable when they commit misconduct. Of course, all of these policy changes come coupled with an understanding that the CCRB needs unfettered and direct access to the underlying police documents needed to investigate a case, including body-worn camera footage, police personnel records, and police documents that document interactions with the public. While some of these changes will also require changes to state law, by instituting these policy changes in the charter, this commission can ensure that there are explicit protections for the most vulnerable New Yorkers on the city level. While the CCRB has made great strides in the last couple of years to continue to push forward changes in policies that make the agency more effective, we believe these 4 policy changes will make that even more fair. Thank you.
Thank you. While we are getting the next list, I want to open up to our commission, my fellow commissioners for any questions for the panelists.
Could I,
Oh, sorry, Hannah.
oh, sorry, no,
No,
it's
go ahead.
somebody. So this question is for Public Advocate Williams. So in hearing you speak and hearing from other forums and reading the charter, I wanted to get your take on the following. There are the charter calls for certain agencies to be under the mayor, right? Or they've been created by the charter, that some may argue would be better under, perhaps not in the same structure as agencies, but the function might be more closely associated to the function of the public advocate, such as the Commission on Human Rights, the EEOCP, I think there's another one, the CCRB. What do you think that this commission should take a look at that?
I think most recently was, I think, DOI, which I
DOI also, right?
Yeah, I don't think that one fits under much of the purview of the public advocate. I think, what was some of the other ones you said? CCRB
Well, there's, when we look at the function of some of the agencies, they're kind of they're there for a certain oversight of policies and
I guess kind of like ombudspersons and ombudsman.
Right.
Ombudsman office for the people.
For the people. That's how I think of the public advocate. And
Yes.
so should those functions be under the public advocate rather than the mayors, who are then essentially these are policing themselves?
Yeah.
And then are there
I think the
many
way
drawbacks to that?
to get at some of those is so that not everything is under the mayor in the way that you're saying, but I think a way to get at that is to actually strengthen the city council. The mayoralty, whoever's the mayor, is the strongest mayoralty in the country. That's a problem when it comes to bed appointments. It's a problem when it comes to budget. And we should change the charter take away some of the budgetary powers and strengthen the council. Things like the commissioner of the NYPD, the chancellor of DOE should not be hired without advice and consent of the city council. I would want to think more about which departments would make sense under something like the public advocate. I tell you the truth, the only one I had thought about before was DOI, and I came to the conclusion that that didn't make any sense. Perhaps things like CCRB or others that have appointments to it, getting a lot of these things are heavy on the mayoral side, kind of loosening it up so that some of them, the public advocate may even have appointments, add some appointments from the public advocate, from the council, from the borough presidents, make it so that if there's commissions or committees, the mayor alone can't outvote everybody else is definitely something that's important. I think the two things that can strengthen the public advocate's office, one, we just got with a charter change. We can always use some additional funding, everybody can, but so our budget is lower than some borough presidents, which doesn't make sense. But the thing that we got that was important is it can no longer just be cut. The way it used to be the mayor, actually Mayor Bloomberg cut, then public advocate Gotbaum's budget because of a feud. And subpoena power, I think given the public advocate, subpoena power can really strengthen the ombudsman role. Because right now you can ask for information, you're supposed to get it, but if they don't, I either have to go to the council or sue. And that's just a long process. And so you want to get independence of the public advocate, making sure that their budget is not connected to the mayor or the council, and that they have the ability to get the information that they need. I think are two things that can really strengthen the office. And I'm sorry, there's something called COPIC, which is about public information. It's something that the public advocate is supposed to oversee, but there's no funding for that. So COPIC right now is just an uncharted mandate that we really can't do anything about because we just don't have the funding.
Thank you. I want to thank all the speakers, and for the sake of full disclosure, I chair the CCRB, but my question is also to the public advocate and to your recommendation about consolidating public safety agencies and MOCJ under as a Department of Public Safety. I just wanted to see if you wanted to say more about that, how you think that would look, how it should be structured, and sort of what its sort of general goals should be if that were to come to pass.
One of the things that I think we missed last year is, everybody was focused on the dollar amount and everybody's focused on NYPD. And I kept saying, I think we missed the opportunity to have a discussion about public safety and what it really is, because I think folks too often equate public safety with police. And we understand that that is a role to play. But what are the other components of public safety? Are they funded? Are they viewed as true public safety? And one of the things, and I actually, Kay was with me when we went to New Jersey. We visited Mayor Ross Barack, because I don't know if folks know, last year they had no increases in gun violence. They had no police-involved shootings. I think they may have had one since. And the George Floyd protests went off without a hitch. And I called to try to figure out what it is that worked. And he actually said, well, we started doing some of the things that you're doing over there in New York City. And I was like, well, what happened? How did it work? And what we found out really is that the big difference there was buy-in. I don't think we have.
Big difference is, I'm sorry.
The big difference there is buy-in. Buy-in from the leadership, buy-in from commissioners. As much as it's being said, I think only now people are starting to truly think about this differently, but we have to reimagine public safety completely different. Over there, they have a Department of Public Safety, of which the police department reports to. They think about it differently. When they hire a certain amount of officers, they hire social workers. They graduate on the same stage. When they all sit around the table with their community groups, they're all looking at the numbers, whether it's their version of CompStat or others. Right now, all of that is within the police department, and MOCJ works with the community groups, which is great, but sometimes I feel like the community groups are on the kids' table while the police department by themselves are at the adults' table. That doesn't bode well for most of the city. So having a Department of Public Safety, of which, and so there's buy-in from the Department of Public Safety over there, the commissioner, the police commissioner, the mayor, and it really works so much differently. I think that will be a huge step forward. on just how we begin to think about this, understanding again. Because very often when we have discussion, people view things as anti-police when we're really just about real, true public safety, what makes a community safe. So you have a Department of Public Safety that can really talk about those things and bring all those things together in a way that really right now is just one group of folks who are having a discussion. I think there will be a very huge step forward.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about Department of Public Safety, but let's talk about housing. You mentioned certain things in housing. I think there was some more we could get into, and specifically around the shelter system and the misuse of it. Would you mind elaborating there?
Well, first, thank you for having the hearing in public housing. I think that's pretty dope. So I think that's, I don't know if they've all been there, but it's awesome that it's here because NYCD is neglected very often. And when we talk about, again, what keeps a community safe, you know, housing is one of those things that I think people try to talk about aside, but it's not. And what has been frustrating to me often, we talk about housing and we talk about homelessness as if it's not connected. And so very often you'd have two different commissioners, two different deputy mayors, two different plans. They're all connected. The answer to most homelessness issues is housing or supportive housing. So we need permanent, permanent income targeted housing for this to work. You know, when I ask folks to think of a community that's safe, what do you think of? No one will say they think of a community that has a police officer on every corner. As a matter of fact, probably the opposite. If you're in a community with a police officer on every corner, you probably don't feel safe. That doesn't mean that they don't have a job to do, but that's not like where you feel like, okay, this is great and raise my kids here. The places that you feel safe actually have access to the things that I spoke about before, access to mental health, access to quality schools, to good health care, to good food. These, by the way, are not excuses for bad behavior, but they're reasons why we have to get to the root causes. Housing is another one. Access to safe, affordable, quality housing is really important if you want to get well when you come home from the hospital, or you want to try to learn and do your homework when you come home from school. So mandating that certain amount of funding goes to NYCD is probably really important.
Can we stay there for one moment? So
Sure.
in the charter, your recommendation around the challenge in housing and shelter system would be?
I think guaranteeing a right to housing as opposed to shelter would be really important because we have an over-reliance on the shelter system. And we're using the shelter system, which actually costs more than providing permanent housing. So we should look to what a right to housing, how that would fix that and how that would change that. But also I think changing the budgetary powers so that the mayor doesn't have such control over spending the budget as opposed to what the council has, can also allow the council to put more funding into things like infrastructure of NYCD and public housing. Right now, I think the public sometimes doesn't understand the limitations of the council. They always can do more. So I don't want to act like there's not stuff they could have done or should have done better. But there's a limitation that I don't think people understand. And so making that a little bit more balanced would actually help in the housing as well.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I have a question about the independent council that you're proposing. Is that going to be part of the, under the public advocate, or is it independent? How does that work and what is the?
I mean, right now, I am, when we have council, if something happened, they got to go to court. It's a city that provides that council. And so very often I might be at odds with the mayor on having the same folks that are defending the mayor, defending me, sometimes can be a little problematic. So being able to have independent counsel for the public advocate alone might be helpful. We kind of ran into this issue a little bit when I was trying to challenge the budgetary powers and pursue the budgetary powers of the public advocate.
So you're proposing more of a, like the public advocate has a right to appoint an independent counsel, or
Yeah.
has some type of access to
Yes.
independent counsel? Okay.
Yes, yeah. Sorry. Let me make
Yeah,
sure.
I have one more
Sure.
question slash comment that perhaps you can, any of you can reflect upon or provide some follow-up information. So as I listen, I appreciate all that's been said, and I agree with a lot. And at the same time, I'm also anxious about shifting or diversifying, diluting power without, and I'm thinking of what Ms. Humphrey said about kind of that underlying, not accounting for the shift in mindset, attitudes, values, or beliefs. So like we could diversify the power base, or we could rest more power within the CCRB. But if the mindset of the people in power and position in the CCRB is not is not race conscious in the sense of trying to control, like develop more anti-racist attitudes, values, and beliefs, then we're just kind of moving the chairs around. And so, again, this may be in the moment you have thoughts about it, just kind of what are some of the other controls that we would need to have in place to ensure that we're not just, we're not just moving the chairs around. You get what I'm saying?
I would say you can never legislate someone's mind and someone's heart. So that's impossible to do. I think you have to do some of the stuff simultaneously and some of it feeds off each other. If we wait until the entire culture changes to change the power dynamics, I don't think that's going to be helpful. So I think you have to change the power dynamic, because the power dynamic and the structure that's there now helps feed a toxic environment and a toxic culture to begin. So I think you have to mandate some kind of education, some kind of changing of the minds. You have to mandate those kind of bias-based lessons, the subconscious bias that folks have. You have to mandate that, but you have to take away the structure's ability for it to operate on its own. Because right now you don't have to have I always say you don't have to be a racist to continue to move forward a system based in racism.
Right.
You might be, so we don't take it off the table, but you don't have to be. And so while you want to change, and that's the same goes actually for, well, no, this is about race, but same goes for transphobia, homophobia, anti-Asian. You don't have to be those things to move those things forward, but you could be. So at the same time, you're trying to change hearts and minds. You got to break that system that allows those hearts and minds to not even show that they may be racist or bigoted, but the system just allows it to continue to go. So I think you can't stop. You got to move some of those chairs regardless.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I agree. Moving some of the chairs, yes. Holding accountable, yes. But there has to be a start for sure. I'm NYPD. I know how the system works. I was a person that made sure that the officer's arrest, how diluted his arrest was, I made sure he was able to get to central booking to make that overtime. So I understand that dynamic. So I am as guilty as the police officer. So there are policies and procedures within the police department that the public does not know and that the police do not adhere to. And until the public sees, understands, and looks at what police officers can do and what they cannot do, I think that a police officer will always feel that, they don't know, they're ignorant, because ignorance is a great downfall. But if we enlighten people, educate people, I think that the more educated you are about a subject, I think you'll be able to overcome, and that you'll be better.
I agree with Public Advocate Williams that, these are things that have to change simultaneously. And specifically with the CCRB, I think one of the benefits of final authority with the CCRB is that it's not moving one chair to one chair, right? The police department right now, the police commissioner is appointed by the mayor. However, the CCRB board has members appointed by the city council, the public advocate, the mayor, and the police commissioner. And so part of moving final authority to the CCRB also diversifies where that power comes from. And our board reflects New Yorkers and is appointed by several members of the public. On top of that, I think one of the other suggestions, which is giving CCRB the power to self-initiate complaints, addresses a key issue that is a structural problem in most governments, which is that it relies on the most vulnerable people to know how government works, to know how systems work, and to be able to have access to a lot of different things. We try to make it as easy as possible for complainants to file their complaints of misconduct, but it is still incredibly difficult for those who are housing insecure, for those where English is not their first language, for a number of different reasons. And so giving the CCRB that power to self-initiate puts the onus on the city agency to be out there making sure that we are protecting those who are the most vulnerable. And I think that should be true of most city agencies, all city agencies, but is particularly true in instances where a vulnerable person has been met with police misconduct and is wary of government, probably for some very right reasons, and could be wary of the CCRB for those same reasons. It puts the onus back on the city agency to act for the people instead of waiting and knowing that there are significant barriers, a lot of them systemic and racist, that exist to stop someone from filing a complaint themselves.
I'm sorry. And so could you just describe in greater detail what that self-activation process would and could look like?
Sure. So right now, if, for example, there is an interaction between a member of the public and the police that is recorded and is, for example, posted on Twitter, the CCRB would have to wait for either the individual who experienced the police misconduct, someone who witnessed it, or someone who saw that video on Twitter to call us and file a complaint. Even if we saw it ourselves, we would still have to wait for a member of the public to call our office and file the complaint. That is not something that should exist. Similarly, if there is something that happens that NYPD knows about, right, NYPD has to send it over to us. There are all these barriers that exist for a complaint to come to us, and giving the CCRB the ability to self-initiate that complaint will remove a lot of those barriers and allow us to move forward with an investigation.
Thank you. That explanation was helpful. Thank you.
Can I just ask one more
You were
question?
late, so this-
Continue on the CCRB a second, and on the membership. Ultimately, do you believe that the system we have now of appointing the members of the CCRB is adequate? And why does the police commissioner have any say in that?
So it is one that is constantly evolving. Until last year, we didn't have a member appointed by the public advocate. Now we do. That has been a huge improvement to our board. Ms. Simmons is a huge asset to our board and brings a lot to our board. I think that it is something that can be constantly looked at. And I think there are pros and cons to any and all appointments, but I do think that the diversity is one that brings a lot of power to the board, in the sense that it brings buy-in from a lot of different groups, but also individuals can truly look at it and understand that there is impartiality in our board because so many voices are present on our board.
Madam Chair, I'm restraining myself because I chair the CCRB, but I can't help but and I see you, Haria, looking at me. But I do think that we should pay close attention to, and I probably could have said this off camera, but I do think we should pay close attention to this appointments process. And that's all I'll say. Thank you.
I'll just chime in, and because I actually have a question concerning that. if I can just for a minute, just build on what the point that she made just about the appointments. And I'll disclose that I serve on the Board of Correction. And there are board members that are appointed by different branches of government. Doesn't mean that they are representative of the community. And so when you speak about there being diversity in the appointment process, is there anything currently that requires that the CRB appointees represent the community, the demographic of New York City?
Formally, I don't believe so. I definitely think that that's something that the commission can look into. But I do know that the diversity of the board is something that our chair has spoken about, and that is very important when we are looking at empty seats on the board and looking for additional appointments, that the board reflect the members of New York City is something that is constantly talked about amongst staff and amongst the board.
Thank you.
Public advocate, you had.
Can I
something to add.
also say,
Absolutely.
can I also say that just because a person is the same ethnicity as another, it does not mean that they're not racist against their own people.
Very well stated.
Point well taken.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention to something you had brought up before about independent counsel. Another issue is if there's a lawsuit, city involved, and our office wants to enjoin an amicus brief, their attorneys can decide whether or not that happens. They can also decide whether or not what we initiate and don't initiate. And so those, I just wanted to bring those up as examples of reason we would need an independent.
Thank you.
Right, thank you.
It's not, I'm happy to answer. It's not my meeting.
As I listen to you, I just want to respond to you and say, as I listen to you, I will appreciate what you're saying. Because just because you may look like the community does not mean that you are of the community or that you can represent the community. And the point that you're making, as Commissioner Bermuda said, is well taken. You know, we could play games and just say, oh, well, let's have a person of this ethnicity and this race. And we've just, we've dotted our I's and we've crossed our T's, and we've actually done no further good. And yes. Yes.
I don't think that the community itself is involved with the changes that are happening on the city charter and the laws. And it's like the same old club making the same old rules. But you have to get some diversity of thought.
And
That
experience.
From the lowest to the highest.
Fair.
It can't be all of educated people making the changes, because we got educated dummies. But I would like to see more community involvement in the laws and the policies and the changes that the city that I live in, I like to see that.
This being said, as we sit in a public input session to learn from the community where change should happen, I think that's a good sign, a good omen that we are here to discuss that. And what I appreciate is a lot of what's being said is on the record and will inform the way that we approach the charter. So I'm very appreciative of when we make our comments and we listen in to the community's voices, thought leaders in the community who are speaking specifically to, again, where we can do the work inside of what is essentially, the Constitution of New York City.
And I want to echo that we have a couple more to testify, but you can certainly submit your written testimony. And as Commissioner Bain said, this is a public process where you get to tell us what you think we need to think about, right? And so I know people are sometimes reluctant to get on camera, tell us what you think, but listen, New Yorkers, we all know we have an opinion about everything. And I think it's okay to speak them, because when we are sitting in the room as different committee members, in our different committees, what you're telling us, that's the notes that we look back on to say, oh, this is what we need to think about. And so it really, I think this is probably, I speak for myself, but I think this is probably our favorite part of being on the commission, because we get to interact with public. So even if you didn't sign up to testify, I'm going to encourage that, as our chair said, this is, we want to have a community conversation like we're having now, because we know that what the public advocate, Ms. Humphrey, and your experience at CCRB, this is lived experiences, and we need to be able to share that and to say, here's what I think as New Yorker with an opinion, what we need to think about for the city charter. So I'm going to encourage everybody, we're here for a while, so please sign up to testify. Please, if our staff are out there waiting, but also please submit a testimony. We want to look at them, because we need to go back and say, here's how the community empowered us to be able to make these changes. So
Can I just add one thing?
sure.
I'm not sure if the commission has done this yet, but something that has been tremendous at the CCRB that we did was we had a youth advisory council. And if you ever want people to tell you what does not make sense at all, what really makes sense, and what solutions, future-facing solutions look like, I recommend you bring together a group of youth, because it has been invaluable for us. It's totally different voices, and they do not hesitate to tell you that actually makes no sense, regardless of what beautiful language you are using to try and make this sound right. It doesn't make any sense. We should look at it this way. And they're really facing a lot of the challenges on the ground all at once. And so they'll let you know exactly what it is. And it has been great for the CCRB, and I recommend the commission to
So
really
if I
reach
may
out to
just
youth.
share, we have we're having an input session tomorrow with many youth and young persons in the city. However, that doesn't mean that we're capturing all of the voices. And so if I may ask of you that if there are particular individuals, institutions with whom we should engage to gather more information and to just hear, we'd very much appreciate that.
Absolutely.
I would very much appreciate that. And then if I may just ask you, Public Advocate Williams, you have a 10 point, you had 10 points, and we didn't really touch upon all of them. And I'd like to have an opportunity to lean in a little bit more. So if you would provide the testimony from which you were reading, that would be most helpful. I really would appreciate that.
Public Advocate, can you ask the mayor, who's up at the mayor's office, to stop bringing people in from other states telling us how to live and how to run our city? It becomes problematic.
Okay.
Well, I was just about to make a recommendation that we ask your colleagues from Newark to come over here and testify before this committee. So would you permit us to do that, Ms.? Is that okay?
Well, I would go deeper. We don't have enough time.
Understood.
One thing of coming in and having dialogue, but I'm talking about changes that are major changes that are affecting people. Like he said, the housing, people living in basements that are illegal.
Understood.
Who does that?
Yeah, thank you. But Madam Chair, I would like to go on record as making a request that we be in touch with the people in Newark, and if they're willing, have them testify before this committee about
Indeed.
how they're pursuing public safety.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you,
We can
everybody.
do that.
So we're gonna,
You can,
thank
you
you so
can
much,
stay,
Public
you can
Advocate.
hang out a little bit. It's all right
Thank you.
Thank you.
for the people.
Thank you. So the next two we have to testify, Shawana Vaughan and then Ruth McDaniels. So we will start with Ms. Vaughan. Come to the microphone. And Ruth McDaniels, number 2 chair right here.
That's fine. Hi, my name
Whenever
is
you're
Shawana.
ready.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, sorry. Hi, my name is Shawana Vaughan. I run a grassroots organization in Harlem. And I wanted to talk about health and wellness. I have legislation, and it's called post-traumatic prison disorder, Shawana W 76337. I'm formerly incarcerated. And nobody in this city addresses mental health and mass incarceration as we address cure violence, and we give it $13 million, and we watch gun violence rise. That means it doesn't work. And you keep feeding a beast. Yet we don't realize that mass incarceration and mental health is a problem that we don't address. That doesn't make any sense to me. Until we make laws, until we implement people in places that understand that mass incarceration and mental health play the biggest plague on our communities in all 5 boroughs, then where are we going? I have the only mass incarceration mental health bill in the country, and I don't see anybody in this room that is screaming my legislation anywhere. That makes no sense.
I'm sorry, can you just, I didn't hear that last part about the legislation. I didn't hear the last, I'm sorry, you can't hear me. I just wanted you to repeat what you were saying about the legislation.
Oh, it's post-traumatic prison disorder, Shawana W76337. And so the fact that it's the only mass incarceration mental health bill in the country means it's a whole bunch of people not correlating poverty and mental health and mass incarceration. Is all married to each other. We don't deal with it at the health department. We don't deal with it in public housing. We don't deal with it in any office in our communities. We're having a whole charter. And it's something that we haven't decided that's a priority yet. We're hearing closed Rikers, I'm hearing everything else, but until we deal with people's mental health to shift the mindset, nothing you plan for them will work. It's impossible. Why is that not a conversation? Where is the priority in that? Where's the money for that? How do we fix neighborhoods? You fix people's minds. I live in public housing. That's my next issue. I live in Lincoln. I live in an extension of Rikers Island. I have told every borough president, everybody who will listen. I've called every office. My house caught on fire. I live in a one-way in and a one-way out. They cited 14 violations and the fire department said it's inhabitable for humans. But I live there with 2 children. But I'm looking at this. We walked around to get here. I looked at the aesthetics. I looked at the windows. There's nobody in cages in this development. Why is that? Location is everything. You forgot about Harlem. You forgot about Lincoln. You forgot about Drew. You forgot about Polo Grounds. You forgot about East New York. I live in a mental health breeding ground. Nobody's coming to see it. I'm so sorry. Nobody's coming to see about us. Don't let mental health be the forgotten, and don't forget about people who live in public housing because they are in mental dire straits.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McDaniels?
Good evening. I'm glad to see y'all again. I'm not stalking y'all. I met y'all before in the Schaumburg. I spoke about incarceration and housing. And I brought Ms. Vaughan from my community because that meeting was not publicized to everyone. And I wanted other people from my community to have a voice, so I'm here. But my conversation today is with regard to the school system and how things are played out in different communities. My grandson, who is currently involved in the private school sector under the Archdiocese visually. However, they have created a new platform called partnerships. And those partnerships are in urban communities. Operative word is urban. Urban communities in disenfranchised neighborhoods that allow these so-called like charter schools to set up and allow the children to pray in the name of Jesus to whatever, in the name of Jesus, they are allowed to pray, and they still are stipulating charter school, they're implementing charter school tech standards at the expense of the parent lower than the archdiocese. Am I making any sense? It's a charter school setup, but they charge parents. And they set it up looking like a Catholic school, but it really isn't. The Catholic school has allowed them to come into these communities and take over from kindergarten to 8th grade. And the parents who have money pay them under the pretense that they're getting a better education, but it is a separate education that is paid for, and it's really substandard to the education that the Catholic schools would really give. And I say that's only reason why I know is because my children went to Catholic school all their lives, as did I. And I'm looking at my grandson's school and I'm saying something is off. I'm a firm believer in diversity. And I know when you go to an all Black environment, it cannot always be right, because Black people are messed up too. White people are messed up. Chinese people are messed up. People are messed up. So now when I go to an institution and I see all Black, it doesn't make me feel good. It doesn't comfort me, because I know something is missing. And what was missing was the fact that they have put this school there under false pretenses. And they're setting up standards that are substandard to the real Catholic schools that come with a standard of education that can't be compared to the public school. And that's discriminatory at the financial expense of people of color in my community. And I said, I cannot. Her daughter went there. And I was fortunate enough to know somebody who worked at the archdiocese, and I called, but they're going to take her daughter back into the real Catholic school. And we have to let people know when they come into our community that they have a responsibility to be transparent and what their agenda is and what their purpose is.
Thank you.
So can I jump in? So first, I just want to begin by thanking you both for what you shared. And I want to tell you that as I sit here, and this is legit, I feel uncomfortable, which is a good thing. Because when I feel uncomfortable, that means that I'm leaning in and, I'm learning and I'm growing. Okay. And so I thank you for your testimony. I first want to just make sure that I want clarifying understanding. When you talk about the schools, are you speaking to, several years ago in New York City, as the Catholic school system just found that it was losing students and losing money, essentially began selling a lot of their properties to charter schools, to the public. And so what happened is a child might have been entering the door of a Catholic school, believing it was a Catholic school. Is that what you're saying? But they were charter schools? I just want to make sure I understand.
They were Catholic schools.
Catholic schools.
Catholic schools.
Put the mic up. Can you put the mic up?
Put the mic.
St. Mark's is a Catholic school.
Okay.
And it's always been a Catholic school. But I guess their numbers were falling off.
Uh-huh.
And the Catholic school didn't want to take any more responsibility in overseeing that.
Okay.
So the archdiocese has allowed them to have like a subsidiary.
Uh-huh.
It's under the Catholic umbrella, but it's not. They're in partnership. It's a separate entity.
With public charter schools.
It's operating as a public charter school.
Okay.
Its operation is comparative to a charter school as far as the formula of who's the director and things like that.
Okay.
That's when I'm making the comparison of charter schools.
So, and overall, what you're really speaking to is just kind of this, how do I best describe this? This kind of the whole, the education process and for lack of a better way of saying it and oversimplifying it, kind of the games within the games and the system. And the, like the 3-card Monty, the hokey doke, okay. I gotcha.
And see, the only reason why I know is because I went to Catholic school and my kids. So now when I'm looking at my grandson, I was like, something is off here, but I couldn't figure out what it was. And my other daughter said, Mommy, look at all the Black, but I'm like, okay, what's wrong with that? But then I'm like, no, everybody's Black. That's impossible.
Right. This is helpful.
That's not a healthy environment when there's only one color.
Right. Okay. I got you. May I ask another question? Okay.
Absolutely.
And so to your point, first of all, I want to say that you're on point. One of the things that I've learned in the last several years is that here in America, we criminalize poverty. and we criminalize those who are mentally challenged, that we do not provide the adequate resources for people who struggle with mental health. And a lot of that mental health is born out of the stressors related to poverty and some of the experiences that one can have in this nation that go unaddressed. And so I just want to first, say you are right on point, and I thank you for raising this as a critical issue and concern. Many of us know and appreciate that in our jails here in New York City, we have more people with mental health problems than we do in the offices and the institutions that are supposed to be in place to care for them. So I guess in this moment, I want to affirm and validate what you're saying. And I want to thank you for raising it as an issue that we as a commission need to center on. And it all ties into the criminalization of people who do not have the resources to meet basic needs. And so I just wanted to thank you for that.
Commissioners? I also want to say, Ms. Vaughn, because my organization has worked on addressing mental health issues in the Asian American community. So when I get together with my my executive director, Sisters of Color, when we talk about mental health, we say this is all our communities, and a lot of it is overcoming stigma, right? Because it is something that we are not supposed to talk about in our homes because it's a bad thing. And so, as we come up on 9/11, it's been 20 years, and I realize that a lot of us are starting to process that, right? And what that meant for us and how scared we are. And I'm thinking, my God, after 20 years, now it's bubbling to the surface. And so when I think about what this pandemic has meant for our entire city, the Black and Brown communities that saw just the unprecedented death, the anti-Asian hate crimes, I'm thinking we should not take 20 years for us to start to talk about this. And, we need to start to heal, because we can't wait for our kids to 20 years later, let that hit them, right? And so I am really grateful that you brought up that issue. And I also want to validate and thank you for your testimony. Other commissioners?
Yeah, so thank you both for being present and showing up in your authentic self and contributing. That's what this is why we're here, to hear from people who speak from the heart, from the experiences, and everyone who has spoken here thus far, I know represents this diverse city and all the challenges. Just want to remind you all, we are your fellow New Yorkers. We are formerly incarcerated. We come from housing developments. We work in communities with people of color. And we're here to learn from you how to go back to the booth, so to speak, and work out some of these items to come back and impact long-term sustainable change. So everything you're saying, we're listening to intently. We're taking transcripts, we're taking the notes, and we will be, action bound around what you're saying. I think something that has resonated with me from earlier testimony, it's that sister said, we don't always know the law, and that's a problem. We're not always aware of where the resources are, and there's many invisible force fields and barriers that prevent us from being a part of the recipients of those things that are supposed to be for us, people in communities of color. So we might not be aware that there was an $80 million plus investment in Thrive NYC, which is mental health for New York City, or that Cure Violence system that you reflected on was an over $80 million, not $13 million investment, but it was born out of a holistic approach that had emphatically emphasized and has worked on mental health. So unless this information is shared, unless we're having these conversations, then it's as if these things do not exist. So I encourage afterwards, all here to make sure you engage in connection, networking, and conversation ongoing, but we will be taking this information back and doing our due diligence with it.
Thank you.
Before you go, there's just one more, I guess, question, because you've got my wheels spinning, and for me, that's a good thing. And I want to make sure that I'm hearing and I'm understanding, and I'm not bringing my own interpretation. So as you talked about mental health and the intersection with incarceration, what I'm centering on is not just, I want to give this to you because I want to make sure that I'm not over-interpreting. What I'm centering on is not just how mental health needs and challenges go unmet, but then also how they are, the deprivation of critical mental health resources and supports are used to create a cycle that can't be broken.
Absolutely.
Right? That the deprivation feeds incarceration. One is then further traumatized by incarceration, returns to the community. And even as you talked about your housing as another element, how that reinforces just kind of the emotional, mental instability, trauma. And so it is this reinforcing web. And what I'm in this moment, and I just want to give it to you because I want to make sure I'm not going somewhere where you don't want me to go. I'm thinking about, is that by design?
Absolutely, it's by
Okay,
design.
that's where I want you.
Here's the problem, right? I live in New York City. I
Okay.
live here. How is it that my legislation is moving in Michigan?
Okay.
How is it that a Republican who called me a negra said, I still understand that mental health is a priority because I had a son who committed suicide?
Okay.
So how is it moving everywhere but here? I'm having conversations with the health department. I joined committees for 125th Solutions. And how is it that I wrote a whole curriculum? I just showed it to her. I'm going to talk to the mental health commissioner of Michigan. How is it that I live in New York City in public housing and nobody is hearing me?
Yes.
How is that? How is that there's no social workers in public housing, yet it's imploding from the inside?
Okay.
How is that? How is that we got trauma buses all over this city, right? Why are trauma buses not sitting in front of public houses? Why are trauma buses not where there's issues, not just at shooting responses for a photo op?
Yeah.
I mean, where are trauma-informed psychologists? I have one on my board from the UN. Her name is Dr. Coral Ann Griffith Hunt. We have money, like he just said. Thrive NYC has money. I went to Thrive. I spoke to them. They said, oh, we do certifications or whatever that is they did. And then they can't tell you where the money went. So it's not that nobody has the money. It's that we circumvent the money and we spend the money within our own selves and then the money is gone. So de Blasio and his wife get no credit from me for Nitro or anything else.
Okay.
And I'm so glad that you have this commission. But I'm still like a rat on the wheel because I'm one person.
I got you.
And I got the solution, but how many people really want to hear it? How many people want to come to the table and say, okay, you know what? Oh, you have all of this? Let's see what we can do.
Okay.
Nobody's doing that.
So if we may ask you, so you mentioned your legislation and could you provide that to the commission? Can we?
Absolutely.
Okay. That would be very helpful.
Thank you. I think Commissioner Davey had a question.
Sure, thank you. Actually, it's a suggestion for the commission that our task is to look at charter change to address structural issues that lead to, that perpetuate racism. And I heard Commissioner Bain's comments about certain things that are going on that people aren't aware of. I also know of the work that he's done in public housing to reduce violence. And I'm aware through my work with CCRB that people often don't know, for example, what a CCRB is doing. So two structural considerations for the commission. One is, and just to put this on the table, how do we structurally direct agencies to structurally direct the city to both promote best practices, in other words, things that have worked how do we ensure that agencies have an obligation to replicate those? So if there's something that worked at Queensbridge Housing, I suspect we could distill and know what that is. Why isn't that then implemented
Everywhere.
in the housing projects that you mentioned? So that's one. Structurally, how do we address the issue of promoting best practices? And then two, structurally, how do we promote the dissemination of information by agencies? As an example, the CCRB never had a single dime until just a couple of, maybe a year ago, allocated for any type of advertising about the CCRB. We got our first big allocation from the Young Men's Initiative, Jordan Stockdale, who runs the NYC Young Men's Initiative, to do a PSA, which the young lady testified about today, I think, or I testified about it today, and bus ads. Every agency in the city ought to have sufficient resources to be able to educate people in a manner in which they will understand it about what that agency has available, and then create access to those. Structurally, then, how does this commission make recommendations so that those two things happen? Replication of best practices and the dissemination of information in a culturally appropriate way. So thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I do have one more question.
Wait,
If I may.
yes,
And it's maybe for a follow-up. I am interested in learning if there are any other issues you shared that you were incarcerated. Are there any other issues, and I'm sure there are, that you want to share with us that speak to just kind of this, how our society engages with, treats, supports, or does not persons who've been incarcerated? I'd like to hear more about that.
And that's why I came to get your card. I misplaced my bag.
Okay.
Absolutely.
But that would be helpful to us as well.
Absolutely. And Kay Bain, personally, I just want to thank you, because it's funny. I haven't got to meet you face to face until now, but I went all the way to UCLA to meet your brother.
Okay.
And do his art and law festival.
Okay.
What you've done in Queens is amazing. I know that everything is not bad. You are one of one in cure violence, just you. On the record, you're standing alone, because I know the work you did. I've met some of the people you've saved by yourself. So I know your work. I'm so glad you're on this commission.
I appreciate it. I didn't do anything by myself, sister. I appreciate that. I humbly appreciate that, but I didn't do anything by, it was the community that does the work, and I'm privileged
But
to
you
be there.
shifted a community. You had the ingenuity to shift a lot of community. We don't have a lot of people replicating what you did and what you do as a model. I'm gonna speak for where I live. I live in 10037 in Harlem. That's not being replicated.
Got you. It's not, what we do is not cure violence. It's called human justice. And what we use cure violence, we use evidence-based models. We use structural dialogue method. We use a multiplicity of ways to reach and connect with people. And I'm happy to do the work with you in Harlem, but it all revolves around indigenous leadership like yourself. It doesn't work because Kay Bain or any individual. It happens because the people buy into it and the people take the leadership role. So I thank you.
Thank you so much.
so I'm gonna do last call for speakers. Many of you are watching this in the room. You know how this works. It's interactive. We want to hear what you need to tell us. So if you didn't sign up, but you'd like to share something with us, share your thoughts. I think this is that opportunity. So I want to make sure that we don't call it a night. We have one more speaker. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you both.
And I just have a question.
Thank you.
I'm in this building, right? Like, I'm totally blown away. You have no idea, because I live in Rikers Island. And I know DYCDC owns all the buildings, like all the community centers, so they say. How do we talk to the city about bringing aesthetics back in communities that are not downtown across the street from one police plaza? What does that look like?
I think that certainly if you can leave your information, somebody will get in touch with you so that.
And I will just show you, there is a nonprofit titled the Fund for Public Housing. And that Fund for Public Housing raises funds to support, the kind of enhancing the aesthetics in public housing. Fund for Public Housing.
Great. So our next two speakers, actually, Dr. Shawana Guilford, and after Dr. Guilford, it would be Matt Pfeiffer. So Dr. Guilford, step up to the mic.
Sure. Good evening, everyone.
Evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Dr. Shawana Guilford, and I am a member of the Stop False Police Reporting Group. I am not sure if my counterpart, Anthony Dulce, has spoken, but I'll reiterate those sentiments if he has. Our goal and our mission is to raise awareness to the impact of false reporting on many levels. As we all know, and what we have witnessed with the prominence of recording with camera phones, with recording of individuals who die by murder by police officers, is that there is an element of false reporting, right? When we go back to those police reports, we see that there is some element of false reporting. In my life and in Anthony Dulce's life, and also in Ibrahim Barry's life, he is someone who was wrongfully deported. The three common elements in our stories is that we have all been touched by false reporting by either a civilian or an officer. We have all come together because individually, we have spoken out about our stories and we have been met with resistance. We have been told by attorneys, civil rights organizations, social justice organizations that it's okay for people to lie. There's very little that you can do about it. And we have felt disheartened, heartbroken, disillusioned, hopeless, helpless. So we decided to come together with the help of some organizations who saw that with our passion and our commitment and our presence and tenacity, that there is actually a problem with false reporting. And because many people have openly shared their stories of false reporting, and with Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd, and also Eric Garner, we see that there has been an influx of false reporting, not to mention Christian Cooper, AKA the Bird Watcher. Amy Cooper has publicly and nationally, it was televised, that she called 911 and reported that she was being harassed by a Black man, and we all saw that that wasn't true. So I shared this with this commission because we want something done about individuals who blatantly lie and weaponize false reporting. We want an end to the problem of false reporting and people who exert their power and influence to steal time and money and livelihood and families away from innocent people. There are people in this world who intend to wrongfully take away something from another person just because they want to feel powerful. My life was impacted, Anthony's life was impacted, and another person was wrongfully deported to another country. ripped away from his one-year-old daughter and wife. And we want to stop that. And we are asking for your help in getting laws in place, because no officer or civilian should have the right to incarcerate an individual, to strip a person away from their homes, to have an individual's families taken away from them. We want more protections. With the DA will have.
We're gonna have to,
Sure, may I make this last point?
I'll give you
The
15 more
district-
seconds.
Sure, thank you. The district attorney needs some type of safeguard to protect and safeguard the criminal justice system. Because right now, with no laws and protections in place, it will be solely up to the discretion of the district attorney to decide whether or not to prosecute those who weaponize false reporting. So we are asking for your help in getting laws and greater protections put in place for people like myself and Anthony Dulce and Ibrahim Barry. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Have a good night. And also, we have a rally on
Just hold
September
tight.
19th
I want you
at
to hold
Foley
tight.
Square.
Yeah, hold
Thank
tight.
you.
I think the next testimony is from
And
Matt,
stay where you are. You came in a little later, just because of Nancy.
Matt Pfeiffer. Matt, I'm going to remind you of a 3-minute clock.
Yes,
So
by all
when
means,
you're
thank you.
ready.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody, for having me. I really was not prepared to give any remarks this evening, get called out by one of the commissioners, so I had to say one thing or two. My name is Matt Pfeiffer. I'm here kind of representing myself, but I do work in a fellow settlement house, Henry Street Settlement, so not too far away, and have worked with Hamilton in the past. I have a few recommendations. They're a little different than what have been mentioned intentionally, just because I don't want to kind of reiterate, because so much great content has been shared. I think the Department of Education really needs to look under the hood at curriculum. I think that culturally relevant pedagogy is important. And I think that a lot of what has been done to date has been platitudes, and really that we need to look at the content that's being taught and the methodologies that are being implemented in terms of the approach to the curriculum and what is being prioritized. And so I think that first and foremost, particularly the fact that BIPOC students need to see more representative curriculum in what is being taught to them. I think that career pathways is a false promise. And I think that more money needs to be invested in career pathways, particularly thinking about poverty being a form of violence in and of itself, and that creating mechanisms for career advancement adjoined to community hiring practices, where we talk about vendors that are doing business with the city, et cetera, have a requirement to prioritize hiring from low-income communities. You couple that with career pathways and advancement, I think those are things that can help to foster more racial justice, social mobility, a myriad of other positive things. But at this point, it is not happening readily or with the amount of sort of heft that it should be with the backing of the charter. I also think that when we look at MWBEs, myself having purview over, quite a few grants that are city-based. Some of them have 30% requirements for minority and women-owned businesses. I think that should be increased, quite frankly, because I think they're up against the Amazons, the WB Masons, the whatever you want to say of the world that have the overhead and the volume to charge cheaper prices. And it's really unfortunate because there's a lot of amazing minority and women-owned businesses that get edged out price-wise. And I also think that the city should put into place opportunities for MWBEs to access or up-and-coming startups to gain vendorship. So basically best practices for them to go through that process. And then even marketing, because I think that would go a long way. I also think that the ULERP process needs to get revised. I think that's a long one, but you could just look in this community right here, and I won't get into some of the development that's been happening, but I just think that there's a huge amount of merit behind listening to the community more and looking at the actual impact to different racial communities when development happens.
Thank you so much. Commissioners, if you have any questions? Commissioner Davey? Dr. Guilford?
Dr. Guilford, are you talking about civilians self-reporting, or are you talking about police?
She would need a microphone. No, you good.
Thank you. Yes, we are talking about both civilians and also police officers or law enforcement. Currently, Senator Kevin Parker has a bill out, the 911 false reporting bill. And in his bill, he is specifically talking about civilians who file false reports. And it's the 911 bill. But as we know, police officers or law enforcement, let me be fair, law enforcement, they bypass the 911 system when they arrest people and make allegations of false reports. So we want to ensure that the protections include law enforcement because they don't necessarily pick up the phone and call 911 when making an arrest. We want to make sure that individuals who live amongst each other are included in those protections in those laws, and also the guardians, the civil servants, the gatekeepers are included because we want innocent people to be protected from anyone who makes a false report.
Sure, I appreciate that. And I checked this out before I say this, just to make sure I could say it. The city council passed legislation that has given the CCRB the right to investigate false statements by police officers. So if you know that a police officer is making a false statement, that can be reported and investigated. So I would encourage people to do that. In the meantime, in terms of this commission's mission, we can ask ourselves, are there things structurally that we can recommend be changed through charter reform or otherwise, as it relates to civilians who make false complaints or false charges? And we can have that conversation as a commission. So thank you.
Go ahead and respond.
I really appreciate what you stated. One of the gaps is that we want it to be a crime. We want it to be a punishable felony for individuals who knowingly and intentionally file a false report, because it is so discretionary. It's that the law can use their discretion to prosecute. It can be a felony or a misdemeanor. We want it stated that anyone who does this will be charged with a felony. No ifs, ands, or buts. We want it to be clear to anyone who does it that these are the repercussions, and we want that to serve as a deterrent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other commissioners or questions? Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anybody else would like to step up and testify?
On the question side,
Sure.
Brother Pfeiffer, so the ULURP, I know you had 3 minutes to talk about it there, but this has come up. We were in the Bronx, I believe. We were in different communities, and I've heard mixed reviews on ULURP. Would you mind elaborating a little bit in terms of what you think could be a course of action to be considered by the commission?
Yeah, and I don't think I want to profess to be an expert here. You know, I think it's, as I understand it, it's a 6-step process.
Correct.
I think somewhere along the line of the community board and getting legitimate input, and then the way that entities that are developers kind of get the ability to kind of move forward and do things. And I think locally, we've seen examples of it with the Extel Towers and the impact of the removal of the pathmark and what that's done for a lot of communities. I think there's a lot of people that are still very sore about that. And you see other manifestations of that across the 5 boroughs. And I guess for me, my point is that it has disproportionately impacted certain communities, particularly, and those are communities that are, non-white. I'll just say people of color. And for me, I just think it needs to incorporate a community hiring aspect. And I
Okay.
think that it also needs to incorporate a greater reverence for the actual ultimate economic impact and the disenfranchisement and segregation that some of this development that is being, causing. It's gentrification, but it's also kind of looking under the hood and really seeing what can be done to really stem the tide of what is happening. Because I think economic development on balance is not a bad thing, of course, but I think it's the way that it's been done. And somewhere along the lines, it continues to kind of defy equity across the board. And I wish I could speak to it in a more kind of detailed way, but that's just, my perception of it, but it's also what I'm hearing from the communities that we serve.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you very much for coming tonight and offering your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think with last call, I think we're gonna wrap up here. So I'm gonna thank everybody for joining us this evening. Your testimony is incredibly important to this process. It is on public record. We have taken notes, and this will help shape our recommendations. If we did not get to you to testify today, you may submit your testimony online by visiting our website. Our website is nyc.gov/racial justice. Tomorrow, we, the Racial Justice Commission, in partnership with the Department of Youth and Community Development, will host Youth for Racial Justice, our last public input session for this phase of engagement, where we hear specifically from New York City youth. Please go to our website under the Public Engagement tab to register any youth interested in testifying tomorrow. This will be a virtual event, so please do not forget to register. Please follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and go on our website to stay abreast of upcoming meetings and events. Our social media, I think we have flyers that you can certainly access, but we want to thank you again for coming tonight. I will make a call to my friend Isabel, who is the executive director of Hamilton Madison, to say thank you for opening up her space, and thank you all for your stories. We heard every single one of you, and we're deeply grateful. So have a good night.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.